Hello, and welcome to today's episode. We're the Roll Wise guys, and we talk about role playing games most of the time. So today, we are actually going to do a little bit of a post mortem. We are evaluating kind of our playthrough. It was a fast playthrough. We only had one session of Over the Edge. It was run by our good buddy Brent, who took us into the wild and weird world of Al Amarja. I can never say that place,
You can
apparently.
pronounce it however you want.
Al Amarja.
It actually says that in the book.
Yeah, I know. It's so however you say it, it's just imagine I said it perfectly like you would say it. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that, how the game went for us, our impression of the game, what strengths maybe it has as a system, even though we only really played it once. Obviously, Brent has played this a lot more than we have, and it's one of his, favorite games, or at least it's on his top shelf in terms of where he places it and rates it. So if you are interested to see our playthrough, we do have it in our playlist under the Over the Edge actual plays. It's only one episode. I think it was about 2 hours long. So if you want to give it a listen, you can.
It's 2 episodes.
Oh, 2 episodes. Well,
we did a session 0 and the thing.
My apologies. If you want to see the character creation, you can watch the first episode. If you want to see the betrayal by Jeff and him abandoning me to a creepy baboon with a parasite on its head, you can watch the second episode. It's your choice.
And I'm not just arguing semantics. I'm just letting them know that if they click on the video and there's no role playing going on, it's because of the session 0.
You and your truth, whatever. But yeah, no, that's absolutely accurate. So I think what we can do here is that if you want to listen to a video, go ahead and listen to it. We'd be interested for your feedback. Honestly, it's a weird game. It's kind of fun. It has definitely some different story beats than you would see in some of your standard heroic fantasy, and we by no means were heroes. So, Brent, do you want to take a moment, introduce the system? Who is this the brainchild of? Why do you like it so much? All that
Sure.
stuff.
I will say one thing that your decisions at the end of the game were indeed heroic, actually. So you were kind of heroic.
I was hoping for a different outcome, but I feel like I only had one choice at the end.
The money was not so easy, even though the scenario was called Easy Money. But anyways, so Over the Edge, we played the third edition of Over the Edge, which is a game written by Jonathan Tweet and produced by Atlas Games, and its tagline is a game of weird urban danger. So that's more what the game is kind of about. It's characters that basically come from any sort of background inspiration, and you can put them on this island where every conspiracy is real, every kind of weird thought is real, every drug is real, and all sorts of things like that. And they converge in this one little island called Amarja, which is in a city, or the island is Amarja. The city on Amarja is called the Edge, which is where the title comes from. And it's kind of just a weird place where you can put weird characters and they can do weird things and get in danger and possibly die or live, depending. So
yeah, and he's not lying. It can be, and when you say weird, and you kind of like, if you look, like, let's say you went to the conspiracy subreddit, you could literally farm that for ideas about what's happening. In Alamarja, you can have lizard people, you can have trans-dimensional crustaceans, you can have any of those things can be real. Government leaders running shadow organizations that are trying to take over the world, like whatever.
Cults, Elvis trying to become king of everything, the ascendant John Morrison, clones, drugs that let you see God, like not in the literal sense, not in the LSD sense.
You can even have that funniest joke that, the funniest joke ever told kills you kind of thing. Like, how do you keep that from escaping? I mean, it could be as weird or wild as you want based on.
And it's encouraged.
Yeah, it's encouraged.
Yeah, which is one reason why I love
the weirder, game. The better.
Like the game. Go ahead.
Sorry, I haven't played it as much as you. I've only played a couple of times, and I think both times with you. But the weirder the story gets, the more into it the players get, because the system is different enough that if you try to play it like a traditional role-playing game, I think you struggle a little bit. Yes, you have to role play, but I think the more you get into you embrace the weird and make your character weird and just kind of flow with the weirdness, I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's very narrative focused, and it is very I call it brain spill, where it's very much like if you have that little twitch in your brain that you think you want to try and you're not sure it's going to work, it's a good game. It's a good game to go for it. Like one of the things that I always think about is it would be for a convention game probably, but it would be like all of the Nicolas Cage characters from a movie or on an airplane coming into Amarja, and they all have to find the one true Nick Cage who's the actual actor. And they have to find him and, all fight for who the final Nick Cage is going to be, and it's all the characters. And like you can easily do that in an Over the Edge game.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting. And I think that when you look at the take a shot, when you look at the components of it, it seems as though the game makes 4 promises. So the promises that they have is that it's an island of threat. And we've kind of described why that's an island of threat. It has a lot of different, anything weird, anything dangerous, all takes place in Amarja, this strange island that you really don't know where it is. It's good. I think it's actually, didn't it move between editions too, just to mess with people?
Potentially, yeah. I don't remember, but yeah, probably.
I think I read that, and as I was glancing through the book, is it basically moved editions. You're going to have story forward characters. So, you're going to have very interesting components to these characters that, progress the story forward. You'll have fast conflict resolution and inspiration from anywhere. And I think we've really talked about 2 of those pretty well, the Island of Threat and the inspiration from anywhere. But let's talk about the story forward characters. Now, you guys, I think for us, at least, when we were developing the types of characters that we had, our characters were weird.
Gonzo, yes.
Jeff, do you want to remind people what you played in our little one shot?
Yeah, I played a character who thought that he might be some sort of proto-human, sort of kind of invincible, because I had survived an accident as a child, and I was constantly signing up for any sort of medical or psychological testing where they were trying new drugs or, depriving you of sleep or whatever it was. I would sign up for it and sometimes do some of the trials multiple times. And then the way I paid the bills was for the cult that Mike and I belonged to, I was a fundraiser. So I was finding new people to join the cult and then, give us all their money. And so I was a little delusional, a little wacky, a little unafraid of any sort of odd danger until the end.
Yeah, and I think that with my character, I think I fell into a little bit of a trap because I actually focused more on my martial golfer than my magic mushroom man. But I think I did a little bit of. I think I did both.
You did both.
But I think it, like, the more prominent, more memorable components was actually the martial golfer that I intended to. And so really the characters you create, they can be really, and they can be really from anywhere. And I think that the types of characters you create can create interesting hooks in themselves. And so it becomes an interesting conversation between you, the player, as you're developing the kind of character you are, because the character you are actually kind of informs the type of, what do they call it? Adventure? They call it.
Yeah, it's an adventure. You can call it an
adventure. They provides you the types of plot hooks that you would use as the guy running the game to say, oh, this is the type of adventure we're going on. And now I admit that in our case, because we were playing a specific one shot, we made characters that were needing $10,000. But apparently I needed $10,000 less to save the world or something. I don't know. It was
we're not questioning your character's motivations. I think, by the way, I think it should be called a vacation if it's an Amarja. But anyways, what I would say is the characters really do inform the story, because really one of the things that about Over the Edge and Amarja specifically is like part of the fun is interacting with the weirdness of Amarja. So the characters are made, when they say it's character forward, what they mean is your character's pretty much, it is more sandboxy than most games, just because Amarja is almost a character in the game. Like it's almost an NPC that you interact with all the time. And so, and that's probably one reason why I like the game too, is because it allows you to have just random things that happen to the characters. Like if we had played these characters in a normal game, in a regular Over the Edge game, like it probably would have been more about you running the cult and raising money for the cult and cultivating mushrooms and meeting mushroom men, mitochondrial men, stuff like that, like stuff that was based on your characters, your main characters. It was a one shot, so it was a little bit railroady in what you guys had to do, because we were just testing out the mechanics and stuff. Like that's the strength of, I think, Over the Edge is like, if you want to run a game where the players are really going to be involved in making the narrative and telling a story with you, I think this is a really good game for it, because the players are going to make characters that they want to play, because there aren't any archetypes or anything like that. No one's going to be like, oh, I am wound up with the cleric. Like that's just not going to happen, because they're going to sit there and they're going to have to brainstorm like who their character is and who their trouble is and everything like that. So they're going to inform where the game goes, and their trouble is going to kind of carry them through. Like Jeff's character in an Over the Edge game, like thinking you're invincible in all the situations is going to cause problems. Like, and that's what the game is about.
Yeah, no, and I thought that was a pretty interesting twist. Now, in terms of in terms of the next part, that fast conflict resolution, I thought that was an interesting pillar to add, because I think that based on what I've read, the rules themselves may not have been as well received as the second go around of it. And so there are some people that have looked at these rules and they said they didn't like him as much as the original rule system and everything like that. But I mean, at its basis, can you describe the rules, Brent? Like, how do you resolve conflict in Over the Edge?
Well, it's a limited dice roll system, so it's very high level. Like I think the first combat was the best example of how a combat would be handled in Over the Edge, where there's one dice roll, maybe two, maybe one for each person, and then it just the results. Like for example, you guys rolled well, I think, on that first combat, and you guys just took out all the ambushers because you rolled well, and I don't think you got any doubles, but you still succeeded. So you succeeded at the combat. If you would have succeeded with a positive twist, you would have succeeded and got more information. Like you would have known, like you would have been able to tell which way they ran off, or you would have been able to, or you would have known one of them, and you'd be like, hey, I know that guy, he hangs out at whatever. If there was a negative twist, it would have been something like they took the doctor and ran away, and then you, like, one of them escaped and took the doctor, or the doctor died while, got killed while they were during the ambush or something like that, or one of the other ones was you could get infected right then, and you kind of knew where, and then you would know where you had to go because you kind of wanted to go to the warehouse. So like, and that's kind of how it is. It's super narrative. Like it's one roll, you succeed with positive twist, succeed with a negative twist or whatever, or you don't succeed, and then you can have positive and negative twist from there, and kind of but it's kind of like Monster of the Week, whereas like something is going to happen regardless. It's like Monster of the Week with less guidance is what it is. And I think that's where the breakdown comes in, and like a lot of people didn't like it, is where something like Monster of the Week says this is what happens when you fail, like the GM gets to make a move or whatever. This doesn't have that. This is just like, if they fail, you need to make up something to continue the game. So, and if you would have lost the combat, they just would have kidnapped you. Like you guys would have wound up in the warehouse anyways, because they just would have won. Like they overwhelmed you and tied you up and drove your car to the warehouse. You guys wound up in the trunk. So like, and that was kind of the plan. So it's really freeform. Like design, whereas the old warp system is what it's called, was a lot more granular. Like you rolled more often, more like a traditional role-playing game. You still had the classes that were like that, but you had more dice, and less the dice are still fairly narrative, but it wasn't. This is like hyper narrative. This is. I can see why people don't like it. Frankly, especially during combat, it's kind of one of those things where it's like sometimes it doesn't feel like one dice roll is appropriate. Yeah, is appropriate.
Yeah.
And there really isn't much. There really isn't much guidance in the book either. It's very much one of those books that says, I don't know, play the game how you want.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I can see why people exactly. It's written in the same mindset as the setting is how I kind of look at it. Like I remember looking at one guy's character sheet. Well, I think it was one of Tweet's character sheets, and like, it was him. He was at a convention running the game. And they're like, well, what do I do with the question mark? And he's like, I don't know, just write it somewhere. And it like, because it doesn't really matter. The narrative and who your character is what matters. So
I guess turning that to Jeff, you this is kind of this is your first experience with Over the Edge, or like one of your first experiences?
I believe that I played one game years ago with Brent.
So I believe it was the airplane game, where you guys were on the airplane and there were zombies and weird stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess how do you feel about that kind of one roll resolution? Did you like it? Did you?
Okay, so it freaked me out the first time. Like it felt like there should be more because that's how most games are. But honestly, it got the conflict resolution out of the way and let us role play what was happening next pretty quickly. So by the end of the game, not that we had a ton of conflict, but it felt like we were doing more and rolling less. And I kind of like that. I do understand Brent's comment about feeling like when we got jumped in the alley, right? It wasn't just beating up the guys, but we wanted to, question them and do stuff. And, the positive role felt like maybe it got us more. And I don't know if that's true or not. This isn't a criticism. It's me feeling out the system and trying to understand it as a player. And I liked playing the game. I enjoyed the scenario. And the one roll thing, I think, let you stick to the weirdness and that was going on and sort of embrace it, without getting too bogged down in let's roll some dice again.
Yeah. It was actually kind of interesting because I feel like take a shot. In terms of tension, I think my brain was caught off guard when you were like, and you win. And I was like, what just happened? Because in my brain, I was like, okay, first round of combat, roll my dice. And you were like, what do you do to win? I was like, I don't know. Is that a thing? So I think I wasn't properly prepared for it. So I don't think it had the tension that it could have. But after the fact, I think that it's kind of interesting because there's two parts that you have to worry about. Is being the initiator is a very important component of the game.
Yes.
So and just statistically, it's important because your difficulty is 7 versus being the reactor is 8.
Yep.
And if anybody does stats, it's what is it? The stats are 58% of the time you will succeed if your difficulty number is 7 on 2d6, and only 41% of the time will you succeed if your difficulty number is 8. So you can see that that's a fairly large spread and a huge advantage to the person who initiates.
Yeah, it rewards proactivity, highly rewards proactivity.
It's a huge thing to be a very active participant in that. And then second, the tension is appropriately ratcheted up, or it can be depending on the threat level. Because I was really having a hard time wrapping around my head on the the levels and grades and everything like that.
Mhm.
But just for like the most compact version of what I understand is that, like, if I'm a guy and I want to punch another guy and he's a level 3 and I have a level 2 fight, then if I throw my punch and it's good, he can go, I want you to re-roll that one dice. So now my good punch has or now my good outcome in combat has a potential to become a bad outcome, because now I can
Yep.
re-roll that dice and have something that's
Yeah,
less
because he's
good.
better at it than you.
He's better at me.
Yeah.
But
And
then
if he's 2 levels better than you, it's re-roll both dice.
Yep. And then if I have played my cards right and I have a karmic approach, I can then retwist that back. So there is a little bit of back and forth that can happen, at least somewhat, between the game to add a little bit of tension, so that it's not necessarily just I roll 2 dice and that's the
Yeah, you can
outcome.
gamey with the you can get a little gamey with the dice. Yeah.
Mhm.
And in this case, the challenges were pretty low level, so
Mhm.
it got a little bit harder occasionally based on some of your decisions, but but yeah, but they were pretty low level, so there wasn't very much in the rerolls, and you guys rolled very well.
Until we didn't.
Well, and they didn't have, but I didn't have any. They weren't of a level where I could force anything on you guys, except once, I think. And I don't remember if I know I forced you to reroll, and I think it did turn it into a fail.
It did.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
believe I remember that point, but
yeah, I believe. But one of the things that I think is also interesting is I think the shock of that first roll, and it's like, oh yeah, you won combat. Like, I feel like a lot more fights realistically are like that than you think. Oh, it's over, and you're just like, what just happened? And I saw that like bracing, like, yep, it's done. I think was kind of sometimes gets the effect that you want, especially in a combat. Where it's like, oh, what do I do? I hit a guy with a golf club. He's dead. What do I do now?
Well, and from a gameplay perspective, is the part that you're really focused on is having that really drawn out combat, or is the part focused on playing the
Right,
story?
exactly.
And in terms of Over the Edge, I feel that Over the Edge really said, I'm not interested in this as much as I am in this other side.
Yep.
So if you want a very heavily combat type game, you can have that in this. I mean, you could literally play The Boys or something similar in this, because there are levels, all the way up to what godly levels. You can do that in the game, but you're not going to get into a very, very good tactical, like, oh, I hit him with a laser beam for.
Yeah, it's not going to be a tactical combat at all.
And so I think that if you consider it to be a very story focused game with very fast conflict resolution that can swing very wildly, the situation and your outcomes, then you're probably going to be in the game you like. And honestly, I think this is a game that you could probably play no matter what your skill level. I mean, it's not a super long book. I think it was 200.
Yeah, it's not very long.
280 pages. So it isn't a mammoth book like Pathfinder, or having to read multiple books like Pathfinder and D&D or anything like that. You have everything in there. And I thought there was some pretty interesting, things in terms of like GM tips and everything like that. So that if you were first time in Amarja, you had, seeds that you could plant, that they kind of prompted you to use so that you could kind of get your brain going for an adventure or some sort of story arc and everything. So I feel like it was it's a game. I do feel like, from my perspective, I kind of enjoyed the little bit of crunch in the combat. So, that was, like I said, it just gave me a little bit of shell shock when I was like, "Oh, what just happened?"
Me too, and that's why I said I don't know. Like, I really liked how the first encounter went, and how the dice roll worked for that, where it was very cut and dry. It was all right, you won. What do you do? Towards the end, and there's going to be some spoilers in this, so if you really want to listen to it, go listen to it. But towards the end, where you were fighting the baboon crustacean thing, like, he has more hit points, so it feels like there should be more dice rolls in that combat. And I don't know sometimes how to bridge that with this system, because it feels like you shouldn't have to roll more than like once, but I think it's required for like a boss type encounter. And so I still struggle with that a little bit. we wound up resolving it with a couple different roles in
Mhm.
this case, just because I think it was worth it. But I think that's one thing that I struggle with a little bit is I really liked how it worked for the first combat. I
Mhm.
didn't enjoy it so much for the end.
Well, and this probably would be a time that you could introduce like clocks or something like that, because having an objective, and I feel like having the objective of just beating up the baboon with a crustacean isn't the greatest objective to be supported by this game. The game is like, well, I want to disable the device,
Well, that wasn't
and
the objective. The objective was that you get the money, which you had done already.
but then he had to say that one thing. He had to say that one thing. I'm still loyal to humanity. But that's my point, is that, like, depending on how you approach it. But I think that's a very fair challenge to have to really kind of do. And obviously we'd have to just play a lot more games for you to
Yeah,
get
I
that.
would be interested. I might try run. I would like to run one someday. I'm probably going to run one, maybe even this scenario with the old warp system and see which one I prefer. Because the warp system still has a lot of the narrative stuff that
Mhm.
that this one does, except it's a little bit more crunchy with like hit points, and combat is more of a dice off type system,
Mhm.
or some sort of integration of the two. I thought about doing that, as there being some sort of integration of the two, where I really like the 3s and 4s. I really like the positive twist and the negative twist. And I was thinking I might be able to use that in the warp system because they're still D6s, but I'll have to sit back and look at it a little bit more.
What this kind of makes me want to do is, it kind of makes me want to play some of the Fantasy Flight game with their narrative dice system to see how that plays out, to see if I get a similar feeling, if that makes sense.
Like what? Like
Which
Because
game?
they have the Star Wars games and stuff like that,
Oh,
where
okay,
you
okay.
can. They have several games. Like Genesis
well,
uses the narrative dice, and you have different settings. Like
I
the
think Wrath and
Beanstalk.
Glory. I think Wrath and Glory uses. I know they have a narrative dice.
Is Wrath and
I
Glory on
think
Genesis, or is it a Fantasy Flight?
it is Fantasy Flight. I think. Or
It might.
no, or no. I think Dark Heresy was Fantasy Flight. Never mind. I'm lying.
Oh, okay. Because Wrath and Glory is Cubicle 7.
Yep. Cube 7.
Um, so I think that I would like to try another game that tries to use the dice in a kind of a twist like that, to see how it plays out. So if anybody has any experience with any of these narrative dice systems, and maybe we're thinking too small, you guys have something niche you want us to try out or something like that, let us know. We'd be interested to play that type of game and see what we can do to kind of explore this a little bit more.
Yeah, or let us know if you have any home rules or how you run Over the Edge. Let me know. I would love to have a talk about it, especially if it's Over the Edge 3. I really love the setting, and I really love the openness of what you can do with it. Like I said, the fact that you can kind of brain spill and make, like, the mitochondrial physician and the science experiment gone wrong, and all sorts of stuff, I think is excellent. So
Okay. Well, so in essence, we'll just wrap this up here. But I think we enjoyed the game. It is definitely not going to replace your itch for D&D style combat or anything like that. But you can tell some very weird and crazy stories. Big thank you to Brent for running us through one of his own home games.
Yeah.
So homebrew, and so like I said before, we do homebrew, published, all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested, come join us on Mondays. And Jeff, do you want to tell people how they can get a hold of us?
Yeah, you can find us on social media: Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and Twitter at Rollwise. Or you can email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking a little trip to Amarja with us. And as always, roll well and roll wise. Be safe out there, everybody.
Thanks.